Now, talking of them, the government has released their quarterly migration figures. Legal migration is down, whilst the illegal migration remains steady. So joining us now is GB News reporter Ray Addison, who is, as we've just been discussing, in Clacton for us. Ray, how have these figures gone down there?
Well, a little bit too early to say, really. Although legal immigration does appear to be trending down, people here in Clacton saying it's just too early to say what kind of impact a Labour government will have on overall migration, and then subsequently the impact that that will have on communities like this one here in Clacton. In fact, I'm joined now by Jason Smedley. He's the owner of the Royal Hotel, where we're standing right now. Jason, what's your reaction to these numbers?
Hard to say, very early days yet. We haven't seen a great change as yet as what was promised, so we've just got to take the numbers for face value for this month and just follow them as each month goes by to see if they're actually true to the word of what's actually going to happen. What's
been some of your biggest concerns? Obviously you employ around 30 staff here in Clacton. People rely on you for their livelihoods. What sort of stories are you hearing from your employees about how immigration's impacting on their lives?
For the jobs, not so much. We've never had an issue here with that side of things, but what we are finding is there's an overspill from London post-pandemic that's created a bit more of a bubble burst for housing and infrastructure here. The infrastructure here is struggling to cope. A lot of my staff are younger people that won't get on the housing ladder. And one of my staff has 2 young children, and she's suffering with mould in her place, and she can't get another place because there's nowhere for her to go. Another couple have had issues with wisdom teeth and dentists, and you cannot get an appointment at the dentist. So indirectly, we're seeing the overspill that's suffering our little town here.
So on the one hand, you've got concerns that immigration has caused, delays and sort of backlogs to health services and housing and so on. So how do you respond when we hear that health and care visas are down? Assume that will also have an impact if we're not bringing healthcare workers over here to serve people like your employee.
We have no issues finding work here. We put an advert out and we have 10 to 15 applicants. We don't struggle with employees. We've got a good young team here that we've grown, and they've worked their way through the ranks. So we've never had an issue with employment. There is enough jobs here for everyone.
Jason Smedley, owner of the Royal Hotel, thank you so much for joining us. Short and sweet, I am afraid, but we'll be chatting to more people here in Clacton throughout the day, so stay tuned for that.
Thank you very much, Ray. We move now on to human rights lawyer Shoaib Khan joins us too. Shoaib, can you just give us your immediate reaction to these immigration figures? We are yet to hear from the government about what they're saying about them. What do you make of them?
Hi. So I think, firstly, I do have to say, I think some of the people already alluded to that. I think it is pretty meaningless, some of these figures, in the grand scheme of things. I'm just generally considering, firstly, they're just a snapshot of what the situation was like in June, as all of these figures are. So many months later, when there's so many changes in the country anyway, so many changes around the world, I'm not sure how important it is to be analyzing each of these figures anyway. But looking at this, of course, like you said, legal migration is down. So again, so many people, that was a huge concern of theirs. And then even irregular migration is down slightly as well. But yes, fine, if that's we're describing as being steady, then that's the situation. But I think I think each of these things, we can see why it was. And many of these things many of the figures, the trends are as were predicted. So obviously, for instance, like the asylum backlog, we know Rishi Sunak, for instance, pledged to clear the backlog by the start of this year, which obviously, we all know what happened there. It was quite embarrassing for the Tories at the time. But obviously, those are figures we're seeing. There was a huge backlog. Suddenly, by January, it goes down, and then it starts creeping up again. Because like someone said just now, the government just withdrew so many of the applications themselves. And all those people are now back in the system saying, we want our claims to be decided. So I think that is the pattern, particularly considering it was an election year and an election that focused so much on immigration. I think we can see now how that translated into the figures.
Well, can I go on? Sorry, I just wanted to push back a little bit, Shoaib, on the idea that these aren't relevant figures, because a lot of our viewers and listeners would feel these are very, very relevant. This is 12 months up until June of this year. It isn't just a snapshot. It will tell a direction of travel, and admittedly that is under a previous administration. Let's see what Labour do now. But Rishi Sunak, in terms of bringing down what you call irregular migration, some people would call illegal migration, in terms of bringing down immigration and particularly the backlog, he could claim some success there, couldn't he? To take that figure of legacy asylum backlog from 98,000, so that was anybody waiting more than 2 years, to 1,900. That feels like a win. Tell us why you think it might not be so much of a victory.
Obviously, any backlog, is a disaster, is negative, whatever you think of immigration or asylum seekers generally. So, of course, we want to have low figures. We want to have less people waiting in limbo for months and years. So, of course, but I mean, firstly, because one of the reasons I said they were so desperate to meet that pledge that they just got rid of applications. And what that meant was implicit withdrawals, which basically means someone didn't answer the Home Office phone call, someone missed an appointment, someone didn't attend the interview, and the Home Office was just finding excuses to get rid of these claims. And all of those people are now back, and the government has now announced that those claims will now be looked at. So all those people, just to try to bring the figure as low as possible that the Tories got rid of, those people are now back in the asylum system. And we can see that reflected in the figures here as well, when we look at the backlog. Again, looking at the backlog about like you were saying, the legacy backlog, which is what they pledged. So anyone waiting, they said, I think it was, these figures talk about people who waited more than 6 months. So, of course, if by January, we had got rid of all the asylum claims, then all those people came back in February, March and April, then obviously, there's going to be no claims pending for 6 months because all those claims have now been registered again in February, March or April. And that's how the Tories got the backlog down. Okay. And which it was dishonest, it was disingenuous, but I think it actually cost us much, much more.
Sure, but just quickly, we're running out of time, unfortunately. A lot of charities that support migrants, in particular the backlog, are warning that Labour's approach is too similar to the Conservative approach and risks fuelling that far right. What do you say to that?
I think that's true. Especially as we saw the announcement yesterday with, Yvette Cooper's announcement. So, I think in terms of the policies, I'm not too sure. Obviously, they got rid of the disastrous Rwanda scheme that cost them hundreds of millions. And like people say, we sent more home secretaries there than immigrants. So obviously, some of those things we can see positive steps. But I think yesterday when she announced suddenly, I don't know where she got the figure from, we will deport whatever it is, 15,000 people in 6 months. Where is that random figure coming from? What are you saying? Why is it all about targets? Why can't we set up a system first, make it fair, make it reasonable, take your time, and then let's see how many we can fairly deport. And we know previous Home Secretaries, Theresa May, Amber Rudd, I think, probably had to resign because of immigration targets and so on. So but I don't understand why these governments are so obsessed with targets and numbers. Of course, numbers is what people need to see, but take your time, come up with a viable solution. Don't say in 6 months, yes, we've got rid of 15,000 people, and then, by the way, 60,000 more actually arrived. So, the point is, what is the end game here? What is your goal? And I think you're right. that is what Labour is doing. It's all about targets. It's all about numbers. Whereas I think they have a chance now. Just take your time, come up with a long-term solution.